Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Azure Podcast. I'm your host this week, Evan Basalik. All the rest of my compatriots are off doing a mix of work and fun things, so they aren't here today. But I am joined by our special guest, Duong Au, who's going to talk about some ExpressRoute stuff. Today is April 10th, and this is episode number 517. And like I said, we're going to be talking about ExpressRoute Resiliency Validation. It's a mouthful, but we'll explain it when we get to it. So before I get to Dong, a couple of news items. Again, because it's me, I get to dictate the cool ones today because my teammates are not here. But we mentioned this a little while ago on a few episodes back, but it's now gone GA, which is I/O performance analysis for SQL Server is now GA in the portal. It allows you can look at your SQL Server instance. It'll tell you, where you have, are you optimized from an I/O perspective? Where are you seeing bottlenecks, in your queries? Just really makes that much more streamlined and easier to figure out. And we'll include the link in the show notes. And then the other one, and this is just neat given everything that's going on with climate change these days, but we've had for a little while some carbon optimization usage APIs. We've added some new capabilities to it to just sort of make it easier to use. Again, if you care about, optimizing from your carbon usage or carbon emissions perspective, optimizing your cloud resources, definitely encourage you to check this out. And that's it for the news today. So with that, let's kick it over to Dong. Dong, if you could introduce yourself and tell us what you do here at Microsoft.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me on your podcast, Evan. So I'm one of the content developer on the Azure networking team. My area of focus is ExpressRoute, of course, which we'll be talking about today. And then I used to cover front door, and then all the services that are now my responsibility is now Azure Firewall, and then Secure Hub is another big area.
Okay, so hardcore networking stuff as a as a core issue. Okay, awesome. Well, great. I saw this ExpressRoute resiliency validation feature get released, and I had reached out to you because you wrote the article. First things first, let's sort of define ExpressRoute for the audience, and then we'll get into the validation. So how would you describe ExpressRoute to somebody who doesn't know anything about it?
I think the easiest way to explain it is you're dragging a cable from the on-premises network to a co-location.
Good use of on-premises, by the way, my friend. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, and then we're connecting you directly into the Microsoft network.
So this is a private connection for my on-premises. This is not public internet, any of that kind of stuff. Okay.
Correct.
What's the benefit of doing that from an ExpressRoute perspective? Or from a connectivity perspective?
From a connectivity perspective, well, it's you get a dedicated bandwidth, right? To start. It's also secure, right? You're not going within or anything like that. You're having a direct line to the corporate network, or to the Microsoft global network, I should say. And you can connect through across the world, different peering locations that we have spread across the world that allows you to do this. And one of the things that we call out with ExpressRoute is high bandwidth, right? When I first started, I believe 10 gig was our maximum. Now we go up to 100 gig. And maybe one day we'll go even beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So you mentioned connecting up to basically the Microsoft global network at that point by this, and we sort of described it. You described it as dragging a cable from one place to the other. But really, there's some redundancy built into this system, right? And then there's also that's there by default. And then, but you also have to layer in some of your own resiliency as well, right?
Of course. So every single circuit that you set up have their standard resiliency, where you have a dual link that is there just in case.
So basically, two circuits, two physical connections under the covers. Okay.
Correct. And that's there for in the case of some kind of device failure, or we're doing some kind of maintenance that allows us to fail over from one link to the other, right?
Okay.
But that's not resilient. That's the whole reason why we're here today is to talk a little bit about that, right? Is that because of how the circuit is set up, right? You're physically in one particular peering location. So that one location could have some kind of outage. It could be natural disaster cause. It could be
this is a
some
building,
failure.
basically. Yeah, like where I'm connecting up is this building. Okay.
Yeah. So I would say, yeah, what if that building has some kind of failure and it just took out your network? Now, both of those links are within that one site, right? So if that goes down, then you're completely disconnected. Your entire network connectivity to the Microsoft network just completely went down. Right?
Okay.
So how do we protect against that? Well, the best way is to have a secondary circuit in a different peering location, right? Or a different site. So now you have what we call max resiliency, right? Where you have two circuits connected to the Microsoft network, either to the same gateway, which is for your entryway into your PaaS or IaaS services, right? And then you also have a dual link to your Microsoft peering services, right? Your public services that you normally connect over the public IP, you can go through that channel, as well as our Microsoft products on Microsoft 365.
Yeah. Right? Okay. So you're talking like Exchange Online, those kind of
things as well.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay. So I've got this redundancy, and not to bring up some painful past, but like this isn't just a theoretical thing. I think January of last year we had an outage at a peering location, and the entire peering location was down for some time period, and that sparked a bunch of this work that we've done. But great. So I've got this, so I now have these dual circuits. I've got connectivity into multiple VNets, but how do I actually know that works? Like, how do I know I have it set up right? Is that where the validation resiliency comes in?
Yes, that's exactly where the validation will help, right?
Okay.
So the resiliency validation feature is actually part of something a little bit bigger. We call it resiliency, but there's quite a few things that go into it, right? But specifically for this feature right here, the resiliency validation is specifically from the gateway perspective.
Okay.
So it's a feature that you can run from the gateway. I believe you go into the Azure portal, under monitoring, you'll find this feature called resiliency validation.
Okay.
So once you open it up, it gives you this this page where you actually have information about the different peering location that particular gateway is connected to. So in this case, if we're looking from like the resource perspective, it's which circuit the Azure gateway is connected to.
Okay.
So from there, you get a nice view, and then from there you can run a test, right? Where you can kick off a test to see how resilient your routes are. Actually, is the way that the resiliency validation feature works. Right? And as part of that test, we run a simulation. Right? So there's some checks before you run the simulation. So let me just run through that really quickly. So the first check you need to do is got to make sure that there's no maintenance going on at the time. Because if you do this during maintenance, then you might.
How can I tell if there's maintenance going on right now?
So usually you get a toast on that particular circuit to let you know when.
So I'll get a notification.
Right? Yeah, you get a notification. And then there's also within your maintenance in the port, I believe there's a section for maintenance where you can actually check and see, hey, maybe we can delay that maintenance if you want to do this resiliency validation test.
Okay.
So let's see here. So we check for maintenance first. The next thing you need to do is you got to check that your routes are actually resilient, right? So making sure that the on-premises network is advertising the routes to from both sites to the virtual network gateway, right? So that's one of our checks. There's gonna be 2 check boxes for those things. So you need to make sure those are.
Am I checking those myself, or is that something the platform can sort of help me check and validate that those are there?
As of right now, you have to check those yourself because there's no easy way.
So basically attesting to the fact that I've checked them, in other words.
Yes, correct. Yep. Okay. And then after that, then we make you type in the gateway name, just one more fail-safe kind of thing. So you're not getting too happy and clicking the start simulation, right? Because although we say it's a simulation, it actually is, you're actually failing over. You're actually taking down, you're actually disconnecting the virtual network gateway from the circuit.
At the end of the day, I am actually like, if I was doing some production workload doing this, I might actually, I'll see this in my connectivity. Okay. Okay.
Yep. And so if your network is resilient in this, then you shouldn't be too afraid of running this during maybe a live production, right? All those are your the people in your company may notice the latency is a little more than usual, but it's a good test. But I wouldn't recommend running during business hours. Right?
So don't run this during peak hours is the recommendation. Okay, good. Yep. That's a
so after you hit the simulation, like I said, it disconnects the gateway from the circuit, and it routes all traffic over to the secondary circuit, or you may have a third or fourth circuit that the gateway can be connected to, and it will reroute those traffic as best as possible to the best one that will get to Azure, right?
Yep.
So during that test, or while the test is running, there's I believe it's a test status tab that you can go to, which gives you some metrics. So you can see the total traffic that's going through the gateway. And also something that's really neat is that you see the metrics for the individual circuits that are connected to. So you're going to see the one that you're testing.
I say it should drop off to
it
zero
should drop
somewhere.
off completely zero or close to zero. And then the other ones, you see all the traffic routing through those other sites, right? So you don't end there though. You need to do some stuff yourself. You may not have a lot of traffic because it may be consistent in what you're doing. So we recommend using a tool, I believe it's called iPerf, where you can actually send some traffic.
Or like NTTCP or any of those type of things that'll generate some traffic. Okay.
Yep. Just to see some change, right? Because you do want to see some change in the metrics, because it could be a flat line. So, and there is a little delay, so it does take about 5 minutes or so for the metrics to reflect on the dashboard. But after that, it does it at a 1 minute interval, if I can remember correctly. So you should see that. And after that, like whatever testing you need to do, you can run it, and then after that, you can stop the simulation. Right? Once you stop the simulation, all the connections should reconnect. If you set it up correctly, it all reconnects, and you should see the results of the tests when you started, when you ended, as well as what routes were a part of the routes that were a part of the test. See, are they redundant, non-redundant? You'll see all of that.
Okay, so two questions. One, it sounds like, because there's a little bit of no pun intended latency in the metrics. And it takes a little bit of time to disconnect everything. I should probably, set up a couple of hours to do this test, or?
It really depends. I don't think you need a couple hours. I would say maximum 1 hour, just to make sure you have everything prepped 15 minutes before and after, just in case something goes wrong. But I think a 30-minute test is more than enough just to test for resiliency, right?
Okay, so I can do this relatively fast, just sort of schedule some downtime and or potential downtime and go do it during that window. Okay.
Correct. And one thing to go a little further on that is that the failover is fairly quick. Like it takes probably 15-20 seconds for the failover to happen. So like if you can do your testing and get the metrics that you need within 10-15 minutes, it's absolutely possible to do that.
Okay, because it's really relying on the BGP protocol under the covers to really do that. We basically withdraw the routes, and then BGP will adjust it. Okay, so that's a pretty fast mechanism. So to back up just a little bit, because I meant to ask this question and I forgot. When we had this outage in last year, one of the things that happened was we had a lot of customers that discovered that they weren't configured right, or they thought they were resilient, and they weren't, or they had a misconfiguration somewhere, or even some that didn't realize that they needed to be resilient in this fashion. And so this tooling is really aimed at that scenario, making sure and validating. Do you recommend, like, who do you recommend goes and uses this? Should everybody be doing this? Is there a certain class or profile of customer that should be doing it?
If you're managing an ExpressRoute circuit for your customer, or you're doing it for your company, you absolutely should be running this.
Okay, so everybody really should be doing this at the end of the day.
Okay. And how do we encourage you to run this? I would say every month you should be running this.
Okay.
Maybe a little excessive, but I do recommend running at least once a month, just to make sure everything's in place, right? So much has changed, routes always adding.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure everything's resilient. But how do we get our customers to do that? Right. How do we really get it in front of you? We do have something that came out along with resiliency validation, and it's called Resiliency Insights. It pulls you into that, right? Because Resiliency Insight has something called a resiliency index score, right? And we want you to get as close as possible. We want you actually to be at 100%.
So it's really a rating of how resilient my configuration is. Okay.
It is. Yep. And why is it important is that the Resiliency Insight actually is based, part of the scoring that we do is based on the tests that you run for resiliency validation. So if you want to make sure your setup from the gateway perspective to your circuit is resilient, like the maximum resiliency that we want you to be, you need to run the resiliency validation on both of the circuits, right? At minimum, both of the circuits that is connected to the gateway, right? And that's the score is going to be influenced by that by quite a bit. So definitely check out Resiliency Insight. I don't know if we have time today to talk about that, but
if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it some, and then maybe we get you to come back to talk about it at a deeper level. I mean, is it looking at just my network, or does this look at other elements within my infrastructure as well? Like, what's the scope of the resiliency score that you mentioned, or resiliency insight? I think you called it.
Yes, Resiliency Insight. We look at 4 basic criteria. Let me just try to refresh my mind real quick here. So we got how resilient your routes are. So we got to make sure that your routes are advertised across both the circuit, right? So that's a big one, actually. So if you're not having dual circuit and you're not doing that, then you're going to get hit really hard by that. And where that test comes in as well is that if you run the tests every month, then the multiplier for that is like out of 4 or something like that, which impacts the whole overall score, right? So it plays a big role. And if you're only set up with just one circuit, then your score is half. So you can see how that.
Because if you don't have 2 circuits, you're missing that resiliency at that point as well.
And then another thing is your gateway, right? Your gateway is a big influence. What type of SKU you're using. We want you to be using the AZ SKU as much as possible, right? And then even more.
That's the zone redundant SKU.
That is correct. Yep. And then we also have the scalable gateway ones as well, right? So that also has the same kind of redundancy as the zone redundancy one, but that one allows you to scale in, scale out on what you need.
That's right, because the older gateway SKUs are static instance count, unless Microsoft can bump it up and down, but you as a customer can't change it. So the scalable ones will. I don't remember. Can you scale them in and out yourself, or you just let them auto scale? You can sort of say auto scale and it scales.
I believe you can auto scale. I got to double check on that. I haven't had the chance to play around with that.
No worries. But basically, you have the ability to scale it versus the static scale. Okay.
I believe it's still in preview as well, so I don't think we fully have that. But definitely do try it out if you can. It's definitely very cool to see that you can scale in and out based on your business needs, right?
Absolutely. I've seen lots of customers over the years that run into trouble where the gateway is just they're doing something that's a little bit unusual in the gateway. The default instance count just can't handle it. We don't pick it up for whatever reason. Good. So that sounds like then the resiliency insight or resiliency index is really about the networking, this hybrid networking connection scope at this point. Great. One other question, you talked about doing it every month. Doing ClickOps every month is not stellar as a general rule. Am I able to, automate this and push this into, I don't know, something like Azure Functions or something where I can just say, hey, every month, the last Saturday of the month at midnight, go run this test, and then I wake up in the morning and I have the score. Can I automate it?
Yeah, as of today, I believe you can do it through REST API. So you can try to do Azure Functions and be able to do that. I haven't had the chance now or opportunity to be able to do that yet, but I do know it is available as of today.
If there's a REST API, I should be able to do it. So really, that's probably the scalable long-term thing is to build some mechanism to build it into my standard testing and my standard resiliency, whatnot they're doing. That might be a cool feature for us to push out somewhere as
that's why I said
as a script.
Thinking. And not only that, I not sure, but I I believe the product team might be working on something for the portal, just a little something for you to look forward
Okay.
to, right?
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Well, no, this is cool, Dong. It's um, uh, I really, coming out of my last, the last 6.5 years before I came back to CSS, right? I was on the live site team for Azure, and we were busy, right? Live site is a thing. We're always trying to make outages go away and reduce the number of outages, but outages will always be non-zero. And things like ExpressRoute are core parts of critical infrastructure for critical workloads, right? And so, the ability to go test it and have a score and know that I'm resilient, before I have a problem, is super powerful. Any other recommendations or anything else about this functionality that we didn't get to today that you feel like we should mention?
I recommend everyone to be a part of the preview that we're currently in. So the way that you get into the preview is you send an email over to the ExpressRoute PM team, right? So
okay, so we'll put that in the show notes so there's a link.
Yep, Microsoft.com. Yep. Please reach out to them, right, to get onboarded to the preview. But not only that, that is the channel for feedback. So if you see anything that we can do better in terms of the portal UI or anything like that, or anything you're seeing that is a bug, that's a perfect channel to report it and let them know. Right? We'll try to get back to you as soon as possible and get you on board as quickly as possible because we want those feedback. And the sooner that you provide, or the quicker you provide feedback, the quicker we can probably get it to GA because we can implement all your feedback and get that done.
Okay, awesome. Well, great. Yeah, we'll get that in the show notes. So we'll drop a link to the resiliency validation. We'll drop a link to the resiliency score, and then we'll also drop a link to that signing up for the preview and instructions on that. I assume there's a blog or something that talks about how to sign up for that. Okay. Well, great. Well, awesome, Dong. Thank you very much for coming on to talk about this. It sounds like there may be some things in the future we'll get you to come back on and talk about. I'm always happy to talk about ExpressRoute and networking in general. So awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you very much, Dong. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you for having me.
Okay, sounds great. Catch you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.